You're listening to Revenza Tales. At my grandmother's reading of the will, my entire family inherited millions. I was handed a single, wilted rose. They laughed, calling me the family disappointment. But that night, the rose didn't die. Its thorns grew sharper, and its petals turned black. And it whispered a name I hadn't heard since I was a child, my mother's. They told me she abandoned us. The rose told me they buried her in the garden. They took my inheritance. I'm about to take their freedom. The Blackwood Manor Library was a museum to our family's wealth and coldness, its high ceilings adorned with intricate moldings that seemed to whisper judgments from the past. Portraits of stern ancestors judged us from the walls, their eyes following every movement with disapproval etched in oil paint. My grandmother, Eleanor Blackwood, had finally passed after a long, bitter illness, and the vultures, my aunts, uncles, and cousins, were gathered for the feast, their faces masks of false grief hiding greedy anticipation. The air was thick with the scent of aged leather from the books lining the shelves and the faint perfume of wilting flowers from the arrangements placed strategically around the room. The lawyer, a man so dry he seemed made of dust, his suit hanging loosely on his frame, read the will in a monotonous drone that echoed off the wood-paneled walls. My Aunt Fiona, with her sharp features and even sharper tongue, received the estate, her eyes lighting up like a predator spotting prey. Uncle Charles, portly and red-faced, got the stock portfolio, his hands clenching in excitement. My cousins, a trio of spoiled heirs, were given trust funds and luxury cars, their smirks growing wider with each announcement. The air was thick with their smug, satisfied smiles, the room buzzing with whispers of future plans and divisions. Then, the lawyer's eyes found me, lingering with a pity that stung worse than scorn. Ilara, the orphan raised in the shadows of the manor. The daughter of the daughter who'd shamed them all with her supposed flight. And to Ilara, he said, his voice devoid of warmth, flat and final, Eleanor Blackwood leaves her favorite rose from the solarium. A symbol of beauty's fleeting nature and the importance of nurturing fragile things. Aunt Fiona actually snorted, a sound that cut through the tension like a knife, followed by a wave of derisive laughter that swept the room, cousins exchanging amused glances. The mockery was palpable, a collective dismissal that made my cheeks burn with humiliation. A servant stepped forward, not with a document or a key to some hidden vault, but with a small, cut crystal vase holding a single blood-red rose, its petals already drooping, edges browned as if mourning its own fate. It was already wilting, a pathetic token that underscored my place in the family hierarchy. I was expected to take it, to be grateful for this crumb, this final insult disguised as sentiment. This was my final place in the Blackwood family, a punchline, a reminder of fragility in a world of iron wills. I clutched the cold vase, my fingers white-knuckled, my cheeks burning with unshed tears and rising anger, and fled the room without a word, their laughter chasing me down the hall like ghosts. The door slammed behind me, but the echoes lingered, fueling a spark of resentment that I didn't yet understand. I retreated to the only place that had ever felt like mine, the old solarium at the far end of the manor, a glass-domed room where sunlight once danced through leaves but now filtered dimly through grime-covered panes. It was where my mother, Isolde, had taught me the names of every plant before she disappeared when I was just a child, her voice soft and full of wonder as she pointed out petals and stems. Now, it was neglected, the air thick and stale with the scent of overgrown vines and decaying soil, shadows creeping across the cracked tiles like fingers reaching from the past. I set the wilted rose on a rusty iron table cluttered with dead leaves, the vase clinking against the metal. A symbol of fragile things, I muttered to the empty room, my voice echoing slightly, laced with bitterness. She was telling me I'm as disposable as this flower, just another wilted thing to be cast aside. The words hung in the air, heavy with self-doubt, as I paced the room, memories flooding back, childhood taunts from cousins, aunts' cold stares, the constant reminder that I was the remnant of a scandal. As the moon rose high, casting long, silvery shadows through the dirty glass that stretched like accusing fingers, something strange happened, a shift that made my skin prickle. The rose, which should have been dead by morning, its petals falling like tears, began to change subtly at first. Its stem straightened with a faint creak, defying gravity, the brown on its petals receding like ink dissolving in water, replaced by a deep, velvety black that absorbed the moonlight. Its thorns grew longer, sharper, curving like claws ready to strike, glinting menacingly. I froze, my breath catching, staring as the transformation unfolded before my eyes, the air growing colder, heavier. And then it spoke. Not a sound audible to ears, but a voice in my mind, clear and cold as ice, piercing through my thoughts like a thorn. Ilara. I stumbled back, my heart hammering against my ribs, the room suddenly feeling smaller, the shadows deeper. They think me silenced. They think her forgotten. They are wrong. The voice was my grandmother's, but not the cold, dismissive woman I knew from sharp commands and disapproving glances. This voice was fierce, angry, and full of a terrible regret that resonated in my bones, a side of her I had never glimpsed. The rose's thorn twitched, not in the wind, there was no breeze, but with purpose, pointing insistently toward the overgrown walled garden at the back of the estate, visible through the fogged glass. My mother. They said she ran off with some man, too weak for the Blackwood name, abandoning me without a backward glance. But the rose, my grandmother's last, secret message, said otherwise, its whisper a siren call to uncover buried truths. A cold certainty settled in my gut, mingling with fear. What if this was a hallucination, a break from reality? But the rose's black petals seemed to pulse, urging me forward. I had to get into that garden, locked for decades, its secrets waiting in the dark. The walled garden had been locked for 20 years, its iron gate rusted and overgrown with ivy that clung like possessive hands. My aunts and uncles said it was too painful for my grandmother after my mother left, a place of memories best forgotten, but now I knew that was a lie, a veil over something darker. The black rose was my guide, its stem warm in my hand as I approached the gate under the cover of night, the moon hidden behind clouds, the manor looming like a watchful giant. As I neared, one of its thorns glowed with a faint, crimson light that cast eerie shadows, illuminating the old, oversized lock covered in patina. I touched the thorn to the lock, my hand trembling, half expecting nothing, but there was a soft click, like a bone snapping, and the gate swung open with a groan that echoed through the stillness, sending birds fluttering from trees. Inside was not a garden, but a jungle reclaimer overgrown with wild vines and thorny bushes that snagged at my clothes as I pushed through, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and blooming night flowers. The rose knew the path, pulling in my hand with increasing insistence, its stem twisting like a living thing, leading me through the undergrowth where paths had long vanished. Thorns scratched my skin, drawing blood that mingled with the dew, each step building tension as I imagined eyes watching from the shadows. Was someone following? Had the family noticed my absence? Finally, it led to a secluded corner where a single magnificent black rose bush grew, unnaturally vibrant amidst the decay, its blooms dark as midnight, petals unfurling like secrets revealed. The rose in my hand throbbed in resonance, a pulse that matched my heartbeat. This was the source, the heart of the mystery. I found an old, rusted gardening trowel half buried in the soil, its handle worn, and began to dig at the base of the bush, the earth yielding reluctantly, clods sticking to my hands. My hands were soon raw, nails breaking, but I didn't stop, driven by a compulsion that bordered on madness. The thorn bit into my palm deeper, my blood mingling with the soil, and the whole bush seemed to shudder, leaves rustling as if whispering encouragement, or warning. Then, my trowel hit something that wasn't a root, a dull thud that sent a chill up my spine. It was cloth, rotted but unmistakable, frayed edges peeking from the dirt. With a sickening dread that twisted my stomach, I dug more frantically, uncovering a small, hastily buried bundle wrapped in fabric that once was fine. Wrapped inside the remains of a silk shawl, my mother's favorite, patterned with roses that now seemed prophetic, was a tiny, leather-bound journal and a locket tarnished by time. My blood ran cold, the world narrowing to that moment, the garden sounds fading as horror washed over me. They hadn't just buried her memory. They had buried her, right here in the soil that nourished their precious roses. The realization hit like a physical blow, my knees buckling as I clutched the items, tears mixing with the dirt on my face. I fell back onto the damp earth, clutching the locket with numb fingers, its chain tangled and cold against my skin. It opened with a reluctant click, revealing a tiny portrait of my mother, Isolde, smiling with a warmth I remembered from faded dreams, and a lock of her dark hair that still held a faint scent of lavender. The journal was filled with her elegant script, pages yellowed but preserved, each word a window into a past I had been denied. It was not a diary of happy times, filled with joy and light. It was a record of a prison, a chronicle of suffering and desperation that made my heart ache. She wrote of my grandmother's cruelty, her words painting Eleanor as a tyrant who ruled with an iron fist, demanding perfection. She detailed my aunt's jealousy, their schemes to undermine her at every turn, whispers and plots in the shadows. My brother's greed, though he was young, already showing signs of the monster he would become. She wrote of her plan to escape, to take me with her into a world free from the Blackwood poison, her words filled with hope and fear. The entries grew more frantic, her handwriting less steady, as if written in haste under watchful eyes. The final entry was dated the night she disappeared, the ink smudged as if by tears. Eleanor found my plans. She was furious, her face twisted in rage like I've never seen. She said I would never take her heir, her legacy, away from her. Fiona and Charles were there, their eyes cold as they nodded in agreement. They're all so afraid of losing their place, their money, their control over everything. I'm afraid of what they might do tonight. If something happens to me, know that I never would have left you willingly. I love. The entry ended mid-sentence, the pen trailing off in a jagged line, as if interrupted by violence. They hadn't just killed her in a moment of passion. They had murdered her for wanting to save me from them, for daring to break free from the chains of family legacy. They had lied to me my whole life, letting me believe my own mother didn't want me, that I was unworthy of love. The grief was a physical pain, tearing through me like thorns, but it was quickly burned away by a rage so pure it felt like clarity, a fire that illuminated every deceit. The black rose in my hand bloomed fully, its petals as dark as a starless night, unfurling with a soft rustle that sounded like a sigh of satisfaction. It had shown me the truth, but the suspense lingered. What else did it hold? How deep did the family's darkness go? The journal's pages fluttered in a sudden breeze, hinting at more secrets buried within. Revenge required a new score, one that built slowly, layer by layer, to a shattering climax that would echo through the manor. I couldn't just release the journal or call the authorities impulsively. The Blackwoods owned the police, their influence a web that ensnared justice. It would be dismissed as the rantings of a bitter orphan, manipulated or forged. Arabella's empire, the family's empire, was too powerful, fortified by lawyers, publicists, and an adoring public who saw them as pillars of society. I had to orchestrate their downfall meticulously, note by perfect note, turning their own world against them with irrefutable evidence. Using the shadows of the manor to my advantage, I spent days poring over the journal in hidden corners, its pages revealing not just my mother's murder but a tapestry of family crimes, embezzlement, blackmail, even hints of other disappearances. The suspense built as I cross-referenced dates with family records, sneaking into the library at night, my heart pounding with every creak of the floorboards. One night, a shadow moved. Was it a servant, or had Fiona suspected something? I froze, breath held, until it passed. The black rose became my talisman, its thorns pricking my skin when danger neared, a warning that saved me more than once. I began planting seeds of doubt. Anonymous notes slipped under doors with snippets from the journal, watching as paranoia spread, Fiona's eyes darting suspiciously at dinner. Charles drank more, his hands shaking. The cousins argued in whispers, alliances fracturing. The tension was palpable, the manor feeling like a powder keg, each day bringing me closer to ignition, but always the fear of discovery lurking. I waited for the family dinner, a weekly tradition of false smiles and veiled insults held in the grand dining room under chandeliers that cast flickering light like judgmental eyes. The table was set with silver and crystal, but the air was thick with unspoken tensions. I walked into the dining room, covered in dirt from the garden, clutching the black rose and my mother's journal, my appearance a stark contrast to their polished facades. The conversation died instantly, forks clattering against plates, eyes widening in shock. What is the meaning of this? Aunt Fiona demanded, her voice shrill and piercing, rising from her seat with fury. You're tracking filth everywhere, like some common beggar. Her words were meant to wound, but I stood tall, my voice calm and cold as steel. I found a fascinating book in the garden, I said, holding up the journal, its leather cover stained with earth. It's mother's. It has a really interesting last entry. Uncle Charles turned pale, his glass slipping from his hand, wine spilling like blood across the tablecloth. My cousins stared, confused and uneasy, shifting in their seats. You're lying, Fiona spat, her face contorting in rage, but her eyes betraying fear. That woman left nothing behind but disgrace and shame. Did she? I asked, my tone measured, drawing out the moment, letting the suspense build as I flipped open the journal. Or did you bury it with her? Under the black rose bush? The one grandmother used as a headstone, a mocking tribute. The silence was absolute, the room frozen as if time had stopped, their faces draining of color. The truth, spoken aloud in this room of lies, was a bomb detonating slowly, shards embedding in their composure. I opened the journal and began to read my mother's final entry aloud, my voice steady despite the storm inside, each word a hammer blow that echoed off the walls. As I read, Fiona's hands clenched, Charles averted his eyes, the cousins exchanged horrified glances. By the time I finished, the entry cutting off mid-sentence, Fiona was trembling with a mix of rage and fear, her knuckles white on the table. Charles had sunk into his chair, a broken man whispering denials. "You're insane," Fiona screamed, her voice breaking, lunging forward as if to snatch the journal. "It's the rantings of a hysterical woman. You're insane, just like she was, fabricating this nonsense." As she said it, the black rose in my hand pulsed with dark energy, a wave of invisible force flowing from it like a shadow unleashed. The solarium visible through the dining room window went wild, the vines that had been slowly creeping up the glass for years suddenly surging forward with unnatural speed, glass shattering in a cascade of shards. They smashed through the window, snaking across the floor with impossible vitality, leaves rustling like whispers of vengeance. The family screamed, scrambling back from the table in panic, chairs toppling. The vines didn't touch me, parting around me like obedient servants, ignoring me completely as I stood unmoved. They wrapped around Fiona's ankles with thorny grips, pulling her to the floor with a thud, her screams echoing. They coiled around Charles's wrists, pinning him to his chair, thorns pricking skin, drawing blood. They didn't hurt them fatally, but held them tight and unbreakable, a prison of thorns and leaves that tightened with every struggle. My cousins tried to flee, but tendrils blocked the doors, the room alive with vengeful growth. The other vines began to bring things into the room, slithering through cracks and vents, ledgers from hidden safes in the study, secret bank statements tucked in drawers, letters detailing their schemes pulled from locked cabinets. The physical proof of their corruption, laid bare on the dining table by the grasping plants, documents fluttering like accusations. The family was trapped, surrounded by the evidence of their crimes, both old and new, the vines constricting just enough to remind them of their captivity. The rose had not just shown me the truth, it had helped me harvest it, a supernatural ally born from grandmother's regret. Fiona's eyes met mine, wide with terror. "What are you?" she whispered, but I only smiled, the power shifting palpably. I left them there, bound and exposed, the vines holding firm as I stepped over shattered glass. I called a lawyer from a firm that was not in my family's pocket, one known for integrity, and showed him everything. The journal, the locket, the unearthed bundle, his face paling as he connected the dots. The police, when they arrived under flashing lights, couldn't ignore the evidence literally wrapped around the perpetrators, the scene too bizarre and damning to dismiss. The scandal destroyed the Blackwood name overnight, headlines screaming across newspapers and screens, the estate seized by authorities amid investigations that uncovered layers of fraud and worse. My aunts and uncles faced a long list of charges, from murder to embezzlement, their trials a spectacle that dragged on, each revelation a nail in their coffin. I didn't stay for the fallout, the manor now a crime scene taped off and swarming with investigators. I took my mother's journal and her locket, symbols of her enduring love, and sold the single perfect black rose from the bush to a botanical collector for a sum that set me up for life, its value in rarity and mystery. It was the only piece of the Blackwood legacy I wanted, a token of justice. The final scene. I stand at the gates of the manor for the last time, the structure looming under a stormy sky, vines now overtaking the walls like a living shroud. The garden is now wild and free, the black rose bush at its heart blooming fiercely, petals dark as vengeance fulfilled. I turned and walked away, not from a family, but from a crime scene that had defined my life too long. I had my mother's name cleared in the public eye. I had the truth that set me free. And for the first time, I was free to grow somewhere else, unburdened by thorns of the past. The deepest roots are often buried in darkness. But from the darkest soil grows the most powerful revenge. If you have a story of unearthing a hidden truth, share it with Revenza Tales. Subscribe for more stories where the past refuses to stay buried.